Yeah, I think that's probably about it. So, well, yeah, good morning. Happy Wednesday, like I said. My name's Matt, and I'm the MD of the Alliance of Independent Agencies. And this is day 3, no less, of our Festival of Happiness that we've been running. It's an annual event that we run here at the Alliance. If you know the Alliance, you'll know that we're all about people, all about trying to help everybody inside agencies thrive. And this festival is specifically focusing on well-being. Hence its name, the Festival of Happiness. So day 3 is here. We've had lots of interesting stuff this week. On Monday, we had a panel of people joining from Scotland and New York, agency leaders that have been talking about their own sort of challenges and their own experiences in dealing with their own mental health and coming through it. We had an event yesterday where we were delving into how to build resilience, which was really interesting. And we're going to distribute the slides to that. Hope you managed to join it. And today we're going to delve into agency culture. And so obviously with my job, I spend a lot of time in independent agencies and talking about independent agencies. And anecdotally, I suppose, but quite often when we talk about the advantages of using an independent, we talk about culture and how they've managed to maintain a very distinct culture, how they've got a very clear purpose. And I do get that. I know it's anecdotally, but when you go into these agencies, you can feel it and you do pick up on it. But we're going to go into that a little bit deeper today. And we're going to look at what those benefits are in having a great culture in the agency, better work, happier people, kinder people. We're going to discuss all of those things. And in order to do that, we've managed to pull in 3 amazing panelists. So I'm going to introduce the 3 panelists in order. And then the plan for this morning is that each of the panelists is going to take the stage for about 10 minutes or so and talk to you about what they're working on at the moment, their ideas and experiences around this subject. We've all got a slightly different take on it. So, and then we'll finish off with Magnus, and then I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to put to the panel, but please don't leave it to me to ask all the questions. While we've got these 3 people on the call, it would be great for you to post some questions yourself. Probably the easiest way of doing that, I mean, we can take some on the call and you can just kind of put your hand up on the screen or just use the chat room. And one thing we've discovered this week, especially with the topic, focusing around mental health and well-being, not everybody likes to put the question out there to everybody in the group. So you can go in the chat room and just ask. I think it's myself or the organizer, and then we'll of course put it to the panel on your behalf. So that's the role play. We're here for an hour. I'm going to introduce the panelists first of all before they take to the stage as such. So first of all, we've got Jo Webb. I'm going to have to read this bit off, Jo, to make sure I get everything correct. So Jo's a former European HR director, and she's got 20 years experience working across the media and the creative sectors. She's partnering with CEOs, leadership teams, and HR teams to help them build a specific type of culture and a people first and a higher performance culture. So Jo, I'm going to ask you to do your bit in a moment, if that's okay. And following Jo, we'll hear from Lisa Lloyd. And Lisa is an award-winning and published psychologist. She helps leaders to create workplace culture where they understand what's working, what isn't, and how to change it. And I think really importantly, it's about how employees experience psychological safety and where their emotional needs are met. And we've got Magnus after Jo and Lisa, and Magnus has been at the forefront of conscious work for over 20 years. Magnus has been working with some tiny companies, Magnus, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, IBM, O2 and Unilever. There's a repertoire of companies to work with. Magnus's vision is to help companies of all sizes improve their purpose, passion and profits by thinking and operating more consciously. But I also know from talking to him this week, it's really interesting, he's going to talk about kindness in the workplace. And I don't know about you, but COVID has caused havoc in my life. But one thing I have noticed, I don't think I've experienced this much kindness between colleagues and people in the workplace as I have the last 6 months. So that's the drill. Got a couple of questions after that. Please post your questions in the chat room. If you don't mind, it's great to leave the screens on because it's really nice to see everybody. But if you could put mute on. I know somebody else has got a dog. I've got a dog here.
Yeah, it's me. Sorry.
We'll have a challenge to see who's got the most misbehaving dog. Mine's about to kick off in a minute as well. So I'm going to go on mute. And Jo, are you okay if I ask you to step up and tell us a bit about your thoughts on the subject?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much, Matt, for the intro, and hello to everybody. It's great to be with you this morning. Um, just to add a little bit to what Matt said about me, I've got over 20 years experience working in agencies like yours, actually. So media, digital, creative agencies. I started in account management, actually, and then I moved into recruitment, and then um, into HR roles. So I know agencies pretty well. But then in 2016, I decided I had to focus on my real passion, which was around the people, culture, performance area. So I left the agency world and founded my own business, Culture Co. So as Matt says, we work with businesses to create cultures that will lead to sustainable success. Um, and the type of culture that we create, I'm going to call it one of joint responsibility, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little while. So just share with you what that means a little bit more. But yeah, I'm kicking things off this morning, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what culture is actually, and share some thoughts on what a successful culture looks like. Um, so a couple of months ago, I was talking to a CEO about some pretty significant company news that he had recently communicated. And I asked about a specific person who I knew was on furlough at the time. And I asked, how they'd taken the news. And he kind of looked at me a little bit confused and sort of said, well, they're on furlough. So I'm not sure we shared with them actually. And a number of things concern me about this. Firstly, the fact that he didn't consider it important, maybe to share the news with anyone on furlough. The fact that he maybe hadn't realised that they were bound to hear this news anyway from somebody, and maybe not in the way that he had wanted it to be kind of shared. And also just the fact that maybe he was thinking that that they weren't interested in hearing the news because they were kind of on some kind of furlough holiday or something like that. He just wasn't thinking of the human, the real person behind the furlough. And my experience tells me that this kind of isn't uncommon. There's lots of people have been quite disconnected when they've been on furlough, and in other situations. It seems to me that somewhere along the way we've got caught up in creating lots of rules and regulations and performance review systems to measure everyone's performance and all the other policies and procedures that we've kind of forgotten about the human bit. And we've kind of forgotten that there are real people with real lives at the end of the kind of furlough process, or at the end of the performance review process, or at the end of the team Zoom call that we've just had. We've kind of lost the ability to be human, to ask questions, to show empathy, and to have a really good conversation. And being human is surely absolutely essential when we're talking about people first cultures, I would suggest. But anyway, the secret is definitely out. So I'm sure you'll all agree that a strong company culture is absolutely critical to success. There's so much evidence out there that strong cultures will lead to us growing bigger, hiring better talent, being more agile, being more productive, etc. But culture can still be quite a tricky thing to get your head around, particularly for CEOs and leadership teams. It can often be seen as this fluffy thing or just a hit on profits. But I'm going to start with what it's not. So it's not pizza or beers on a Friday. It's not beanbags. It's not yoga. It's not swings in the office. Although that sounds like a lovely office to work in, it doesn't make a culture. Those things don't make a culture, and certainly not a successful one. So I would say that culture is very simply the way we do things around here. So it's the sum total of the way you lead, your values, your beliefs, your traditions, your behaviors, your habits, your working practices. It is the environment that you create in working with you. And by far and away, the most important part of that is actually behavior. So you can have the most beautifully crafted statements about your beliefs and your values, but if the behavior doesn't match up, doesn't align with that, then your culture isn't what you want it to be. And perhaps more importantly, the experience of your culture isn't what you're telling people that they should expect. Every business has a culture, whether they intend it or not. It develops literally from day one. So you have a choice to either consciously create one or let it happen by default. And I would highly recommend the first approach. So consciously creating the culture that you want. If you don't consciously create it, or if you focus on the wrong things, then things will go wrong. And there's loads of examples in the media for us. I'm sure we've all read companies like Uber where things have gone wrong because we focused on the wrong stuff. But the problem is that traditional approaches to culture don't work. So the perks like the beers and the beanbags doesn't work. Money alone isn't enough to attract top talent. Engagement levels were already at an all-time low, even before all the stress and uncertainty we've had during COVID. And poor leadership and poor people management is still a major issue. In fact, it is the number one reason that people leave their jobs and continues to be the number one reason. So what does a great people first culture look like, according to me? So it's about creating an environment for people to do their best work. It's as simple as that. We want everybody to be able to do their best work. And lots of people have said that with the impact of COVID, people are saying, do we need a new approach to culture? Do we need a new approach for a new era, for this new normal that we're all heading into? And I would very firmly say no, actually. COVID hasn't changed how we do our best work. It's actually made focusing on the right stuff even more important. So the fundamentals are exactly the same as they always were. So let's look into what these fundamentals are that will allow us to do our best work. And I'm going to share with you three things, three kind of crucial ingredients that will allow us to do our best work. So the first thing is cause. And that's about having a really strong identity that drives everything in your business. So why you do what you do and how you do it. So it's about your purpose, it's about your beliefs, it's about your values, and it's about doing meaningful, purposeful work that serves others, that does good in society. That's the first thing. The second thing is community. And this is about everybody having a strong connection to the cause and to each other. So it's about shared goals, it's about openness, transparency, and it's about creating psychological safety so that everybody's voice can be heard in the business. And it's about elevating the role of employees to partners. So you're working with the business and not for the business. And the final kind of ingredient that I'm going to talk about here is career. And this is about creating an environment where people are set up and supported to perform to their potential and make the most of the talent that they've got. So it's about ways of working that respect the complexities of modern life. It's about offering autonomy, flexibility. It's about focusing on health and well-being. And it's about providing lots and lots of opportunities for development, for learning and for personal development. So those are the three ingredients that I would look at in terms of creating a great culture. In this culture, there is a role for everybody in the business to play. So there is joint responsibility. It starts with you guys, the leaders, or the company leaders, and you have a critical role to play in consciously creating and sustaining the culture. But there's also a really important role for people leaders. And by people leaders, I mean anybody who has responsibility for leading or managing others. And this is really about them learning to lead people rather than manage or control tasks. And they have a crucial role to play. But you also want everybody else in the business to be a self leader. So you're looking for everyone in the business to own their own career, to own their own performance, and to own their own development. It's not easy to build a great culture, and it's certainly not as easy as kind of writing some value statements or just handing out a new handbook. Culture is a living, breathing thing, and it takes a lot to get it right. It takes hard work and it takes commitment from everyone, and particularly from the leaders. It just won't happen by chance. But it's absolutely about being human first and foremost, I would say. I am going to pause there and hand over to Lisa at this point.
Fab, thank you, Jo. I love the fact that you've gone before me, because you've set the tone really well for everything I'm going to be talking about. Because my mantra is that when we get people right, we get business right. And that is such a huge topic. And with only 10 minutes to talk today, I'm going to focus a lot on the role of the brain. And working as a psychologist with organisations, and also as a psychotherapist for a part of the week, I do a lot with people around the impact of the brain on their thinking, on their behaviour, on their performance. So I'm going to talk to you today about 4 key approaches to leadership that make a difference to well-being, engagement, and therefore people's performance. As Jo said, when people are happy, they perform well. And so it's about getting that culture right that people can genuinely feel they're able to thrive. And like Jo said about the word well-being, feeling a bit fluffy for a lot of leaders still. Obviously none of you are here because you're joining in this Festival of Happiness, but there is this real kind of like, a shudder of dismay when we hear this word well-being. It's like, it's not for me. But actually the research shows really clearly you get a really good return on investment. So if you're someone who needs to be convinced by numbers rather than because it morally feels right, there's data that shows for every pound you spend, you get a £6 return. If you're approaching well-being and engagement at a culture-wide level, an organisational level, you're not being reactive, working with people one-to-one. So it's really important to get this whole organisation culture right. And so thinking about the brain, I want to just start off there, because once you understand what's going on in your head, but also in the brains of everyone in your organisation, it really puts you in a position of being able to make a difference. So we know, I mean, you'll be able to think of a time when you have felt really under pressure and you have felt really worked up and your head is full and you feel like you're about to explode. And there's that moment of heightened emotional arousal. And when your emotional arousal is really high, your amygdala, which I liken to like a little security guard, takes over and literally will hijack your cognitive brain. The problem with that is your cognitive brain is where you do all your planning or your problem solving or your rational thought, all the clever stuff you need in order to do your job well. So as soon as your emotional arousal increases, your cognitive capacity reduces. And that can be over anything. It could be a tricky relationship with someone at work. It can be worrying about a particular pitch you're making. It could be perception of it, that you're going to fail. It doesn't matter what it is that's causing that emotional arousal. But as soon as your emotional arousal increases, you become more hypervigilant. So imagine your security guard who's on the lookout all the time, scanning the environment for threat. And it will see threat in terms of, well, so-and-so didn't check in with me on a call today, so maybe they don't care. Or so-and-so's been, redundancies are going up and I haven't spoken to my manager for a while, so maybe I'm on the way out. It doesn't matter what it is, but your security officer starts focusing in on all that. And you end up having this sort of, people are often familiar with the term black and white thinking, but I think of it as a spotlight. So as soon as your emotional arousal is up, you end up putting a spotlight on the problem, and it really narrows down your perception. So you can't see other people's perspectives. So you can't, for people trying to be creative and to work with your clients in terms of understanding what they want and how to match that, you need to be able to put yourself in their shoes. You can't do that when your brain is shutting down just to focus on the problem. And it really impacts your intellectual brain. So anything that you come across can feel threatening. And if you end up, if your emotional arousal has gone up because you've ended up having an argument with a particular colleague, your brain logs that. And next time you see that colleague, your brain will pattern match back to the time before where you felt under threat, and immediately your emotional arousal goes up. So you have to be really aware of what's happening in people's brains, because actually you might have a lot of people around you, if they're in a state of stress or anxiety, who intellectually are not in the best place to be able to do their best. And I'm going to talk about 4 main parts that you have a key role in as leaders in terms of helping people be able to lower their emotional arousal. The first part is about psychological safety, and Joe talked about that briefly. When we talk about psychological safety, there are 4 main parts to that. The first one is about being included, so that sense of belonging. And you know that when Matt was suggesting about the kindness he's experienced during or since COVID, when people feel a sense of belonging, when they connect with people, they get positive attention from people, we feel good. If we feel an outsider and we don't feel we connect, we feel emotionally threatened and we're on high alert. We have that fight-flight response. And so as a leader, it's the little things you can do about sort of checking in with people at the start of meetings. And people are really good at going, yeah, I do that. I say, how are you doing? Everyone goes, I'm fine. And then we move on to the agenda. That doesn't really cut it. It's actually spending and putting 5 minutes at least aside, if not 10, depending on how long your meeting is, to really check in with people, have those conversations that you would normally be having if you were passing people in an office around a water filter. The second part of that is about being safe to learn and to feel safe to experiment. So in your organisation, how do you set the tone for people to be able to have a go at new things at risk of failing some of those? Because if you're trying new things out, there are going to be mistakes. It's about what you set the tone as being acceptable. Does everything have to be perfect, or are people okay to experiment? The third part of psychological safety is about being able to contribute safely. So when people are contributing, or are they contributing firstly, and are they contributing just ideas about your product or your service, or do you ask them to contribute about your wider organisation, your wider culture, things that they observe you could potentially be doing better, you could be doing differently? So how much do you invite that feedback from them? And the fourth part of psychological safety is when we think about challenger safety. So that whole idea that they can challenge the status quo. Are you open to people in your organisation being able to say to you, actually, you know what, I'm not so sure that's the best way we do things around here. Or I've been working on this and actually I found a kind of different way which feels that it flows a bit better. Are they able to do that without being embarrassed or ridiculed, without any sort of negative, any sign of retribution? So as a leader, you really set the tone for that psychological safety and how well that fits with your culture. That all links really closely with the second key aspect, which is emotional needs. And when our environment meets our emotional needs, we thrive. Now, we're all really good at knowing that we need water and we need to have snacks and we need sleep and we need exercise and so on. But actually, as a leader, when you create a culture where people have a sense of control over what they do day to day and over how they organise their time, when you meet their need for success and for that feeling of success, that feeling of achievement, then it raises people's sense of status. When people feel good about themselves, they're going to perform better. So how do you go about helping people feel good about themselves? How do you share someone's value? What is it you value? Is it someone's output, or is it their ability to work together as a team? Is it their ability to be brave enough to try new things and risk getting it wrong? So what is it you're rewarding? Looking at people's strengths, how clear are you about what people's strengths are, and how clear are they about what their own strengths are? And how do you carve up roles to be able to enable people to fit their strengths? So rather than being kind of having the boundaries of traditional roles, actually, if I'm great at this bit, but rubbish at that bit of my role, but someone over there is really good at that bit of my role that I don't like, can't you just tweak roles a little bit? Because when people start to break down traditional barriers and do things that enable people to be in a sense of flow and be able to do their best, then again, people are happy at work and they give more. And then the final bit on emotional needs, I would say, is about how you give people positive attention. So when at the moment we're working from home is really, really hard, and people kind of check in and people are getting a bit of Zoom fatigue, and and so on. But actually, how do you really check in? And sometimes I speak to leaders who say, oh, it's fine, it's fine. I have a monthly call and I'll ask them how they're doing then. That doesn't really show you care. That shows you got it in your schedule to phone them on the first Thursday of every month. Whereas actually, when you randomly send them a text or WhatsApp, you've kind of just pick up the phone, say, how are you doing today? Whatever, that's the bit that shows you're giving them attention and you care about them. The third aspect is about stress. And the reason I want to talk about this briefly is because some people kind of wear stress with that badge of honor. And, if someone's not stressed, they're clearly not working hard enough. And actually, I would really challenge that. There's a real difference between being stressed and stretched. Your brain needs to be stretched because that's when it's engaged in something that's really meaningful, it's really purposeful, it's really motivating. As soon as you're stressed is the state of emotional arousal being high. And that is making you intellectually less capable, less competent. Your performance goes down. So it's about thinking about when you're piling on the pressure, obviously none of you do, but when leaders pile on the pressure, and then you've got this poor group of middle managers as well who are having to kind of pass that message on and they're under huge stress because no one's looking out for them. We forget that middle managers are people too. They're kind of this superpower level in an organization. When we think about actually piling on the pressure, it puts people into a state where they can't perform. So we need to encourage people to be in their zone of optimal performance where people are able to take time out, have some downtime and so on. So you again set the tone for that. Are you encouraging people to move away from their desks? Are you encouraging people to take a walk? Are you encouraging people to actually just chill out and go for a walk together or play a game of ping pong together, whatever it is? Because your best inspirations happen when you're having a shower. It's when it's those moments where you're not pushing it, they just come to you. And finally, I just wanted to mention briefly about change, because we're all going through change. And I want you just to remember as leaders, and the reason I wanted to kind of tag this on the end is because I've been in a lot of training recently around leaders leading change successfully. We tend to forget the emotional journey in change. We tend to focus on the technical side of change. We tend to focus on this is what we've got to put into our business. This is how we've got to physically change our processes. But when you do that and you forget the people side, the emotional side, we meet resistance. And as leaders, you set the tone for if that's okay. Just to let you know that resistance means that people are trying to work out and calibrate what that change means for themselves. So it's not them being deliberately stubborn. So reframe, when someone's kind of stamping up and down and saying, I don't like this change, they're going through the grief cycle. They're leaving something behind, they're moving something new. They might feel uncomfortable about it. They've got to work out what that actually means for them. And in terms of as a leader, you need to be able to hear the communication, two-way, hear information coming back from employees about what's working, what's not working, what they're feeling threatened about, what they want more information on, how they want that information, and so on. So you're setting the tone of how to help people navigate that change, which is hugely important at the current time. So I'm going to stop there because I could keep talking for hours, and I'm going to hand over to Magnus.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I love the statement that you both made about happy people perform well. I'm going to talk about kindness and how kindness makes people happy and how they perform well as a consequence. I had a bit of a journey on, so I'm going to talk just about one thing, kindness. I'm going to leave you one message about kindness, and I'm also going to explain some of the benefits of kindness, both to the individual but also in the workplace. And this all started for me just before lockdown, where I do culture work with agencies. I've run agencies in the past, and I had 3 agency leaders all say to me quite independently within the course of, I think it was like February or something like that, I'd like to create a kinder working environment. How do I do that? Has to be said, my initial reaction was, I'm not quite sure why. Why are you focusing on kindness? What's important with that? Why is that? And there was a little bit of, oh, we've done the well-being thing, I'm sort of looking for something else. And so there's a little bit of that going on. And then we had lockdown. And so I thought, you know what, I'm gonna look into this, because when 3 people are sort of saying something to you, there's clearly something going on. And as Matt was saying, I think one of the things that we saw during COVID and what we'll probably now call the first lockdown is human kindness, sort of elevated to significant extents. And I saw that when I was doing some work with some of the people who've been furloughed, back in the day when the Alliance was called the MAAG, there were amazing weekly sessions they ran with furloughed people. Some of you may have been on there. And kindness was something that was talked about a lot, particularly kindness to self and actually looking after oneself. It was one of the themes that kind of, came out sort of time and time again that we talked about. I then did a training session, which I did for the first time with the Alliance, and I've done afterwards, where I get people in a Zoom call like this, and I get them to then break out into individual groups and talk about a time at work when somebody did something kind. It could have been them, or preferably when somebody did something kind to them. How did they feel, and what happened? And there was a great story. I hear great stories, but what always happens is that the energy, and as much as you can have the energy in a Zoom meeting, sort of completely changes when people come back. People are really, they're much more upbeat, and they're sort of more excited than they were previously. And there was a lovely story I heard just last week, where somebody was ill, and their boss delivered home cooked meals to them every day during the week, because they knew that person couldn't look after themselves. And that story, it was almost like a hush in the kind of whole Zoom conversation. People going, "Oh, that's so nice." And this lady was talking about what she felt about her work and her boss and her colleagues as a consequence of this simple act of kindness. So what I found through the work all the research I've done and kind of the work I'm now doing, is that kindness is a really profound thing at both an individual and a sort of company level that a lot of us haven't focused about. We sort of talk about it. We all know what kindness looks like, but we've never really thought about being deliberate about creating cultures of kindness within our own organization. So I'm going to just talk about two things. I'm going to talk about what kindness does to us, and then I'm going to talk about the benefits of kindness at work, because this is inevitably the question I get asked, which is, well, that all sounds good, but kind of what does it do for my business? So overall, as I talked about, kindness makes us happy people perform well. It kind of just simply improves our mental and physical well-being. It improves our mood because it essentially releases happy hormones and neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, which make us all feel good. And this is just actually being kind, or seeing kindness does the same thing. So I'll refer you back to when people are hearing that story of somebody being kind, all those hormones going, wow, I feel great. Kindness decreases stress. So one study showed that people who are kind, who practice kindness on a regular basis, have 23% less, a quarter less stress hormone cortisol, and age more slowly than the general population. It decreases anxiety. There was a lovely study where people who sort of said, basically they're anxious individuals were asked to perform an act of kindness every day for Monday to Friday for a month. And after just 1 month, these individuals said they, significantly improved their positive mood, and also they were doing less of what's called social avoidance behavior. Basically, they were getting out more into life. Kindness elevates energy levels. When a group of individuals were asked to help others, about half of them reported they felt stronger and more energetic. And kindness, so there's one study, a lovely study for people who are over 55. If they volunteer for at least 2 organizations in this study, they had an impressive 44% lower likelihood of dying early. So I wouldn't want to be in the control group on that one. But, just kindness does lots of good things to us in terms of, sort of our mental and physical well-being. But what about at work? So what does it do? Is there evidence out there that kindness is something that I do now encourage people at all levels within an organization to encourage? So kindness helps people work better together. There's one study of CEOs who have said that kindness within an organization increases employee commitment, cuts down barriers to communication, reduces infighting and negative competition between staff, and strengthens relations externally. So this is a CEO saying this. There's a fantastic study going back to the physical benefits of kindness, is that kindness has been proven to release oxytocin, which if you release that when you're having a conversation with somebody, basically means you trust that person more. So kindness within a work environment has been proven to elevate levels of trust. no great surprise, it heightens employee engagement and commitment. So over the past 20 years, employee engagement has increasingly become a significant predictor of an organization's profitability and productivity. People like Gallup have been studying this for years. And ongoing studies have shown that kindness enhances the engagement of both employees and customers. And research has shown that employee loyalty increases when they have opportunities to demonstrate kindness in the workplace. There are quite a few studies out there where people are given the opportunity or encouraged to be kind to each other. It makes them feel better about themselves. It makes them feel better about the people they're being kind for. It also makes them feel more creative because they're expressing kindness in all sorts of creative ways. And it also makes them feel that they're more in tune with their values. So they're working for an organization which lets them manifest their values more. Kindness fuels learning, creativity, and innovation. Lisa talked about psychological safety. It's really, really important. So failing fast and failing early. I know people talk about it, but if you want to be an innovative organization, you've got to be in a culture where failure is encouraged. Kindness is an enhancer to psychological safety, so you feel comfortable telling people that you've failed, and it creates a more positive creative culture, quite frankly. Kindness has been shown to attract talent, and there are also other studies where, not a great surprise, when you're kind to the customers, they tend to stay. So kindness, I'll end now because it'd be great to get onto some conversation. Kindness, there are direct lines that we can draw between kindness and all the kind of things you want in well-being in terms of, improving your well-being. But also organizations, the ones that I'm working with now, and I can see from other research studies, if you are deliberate about encouraging kindness within your organization, you essentially create a happier, more productive, more creative place to work, which is no bad thing as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Magnus, Lisa, Joe. That was really interesting. It's just a kind of a side subject, really. But Magnus, you just reminded me of. I remember being a teenager and being at my dad's house for dinner, and they've got some family friends that are pretty successful generally. They were living in Hong Kong. They just come back, and they had a lot of money and big, powerful jobs. And we're having dinner, and the guy, I was always kind of in awe of this guy. His kids were just about to go into university. And we all assumed that he'd be really kind of on it and had real kind of high ambitions for their education. And I remember him saying, I just want them all to be kind. No. And that's really stuck with me. What a lovely comment. It's like, no, it's just, if they're all kind, that will make their way in life. And it was quite a surprising comment, but a nice one. So I've got a couple of questions. I know there are a couple of others in the chat. Some of them have come through to me. I think that there are a couple of others in there, but please do use it and use the time to ask our panel a few questions of your own. I'll start off with one though, if that's okay. I'm going to put it to all of you. So Joe, at the very beginning, you used a phrase that culture is a tricky thing to get your head around, which it is. So taking that a step further, if it's a tricky thing to get our head around, how can we start to try and measure culture in our agencies? Is that an answer that anyone would like to jump in and take? Is that a question, sorry, anyone would like to jump in and take?
Sure, I will have a crack at that. What would I say? So to start with, I would say you've got to be clear on what you're measuring. So getting clear on what you want to be different. If you're going to do some kind of culture work, what is it we're looking for to be different at the end of this? Yeah, get really clear on what it is that you're measuring and what you're trying to change to begin with, and just get good at measuring things, looking for data to support what what you're trying to achieve. There's so many different types of things you can measure. And there's this difference between kind of quantitative measures and things that have numbers attached to them, and then more qualitative, feedback and information. That more of that type of measurement. And I know CEOs love the quantitative stuff. They want to know numbers and they want to know how this is affecting business performance at the end of the day. And I've spotted Adam's question in the chat box, which this kind of sort of aligns with as well. So I think a mixture of quantitative and qualitative things, but I think that focusing on some quantitative to start with is really, really useful. The things we can do with quantitative measurements. So lots of people talk about turnover. It is really easy to measure the cost of employee turnover to the business. So that's a good figure to share. With my view on turnover is a little bit, sometimes we need turnover, so I'm not sure it's the right thing to be measuring, because actually, you know, particularly at the moment, as there's loads of change in the world, and some, you know, skill sets need to move on, and some, you know, roles will need to evolve, etc. So sometimes turnover is needed in a business. So I would more suggest, I'm looking at, do we have the right people in the right roles? So how many gaps have we got where either there is somebody who isn't in the role at all, we can't find them, we can't hire them, they're not, it's an empty seat, if you like, or we've got somebody who is underperforming, isn't the right person. So how many gaps have we got, and what's that cost looking like to the business? I could go on, but I'll stop there and let somebody else have a dive in as well.
I was going to add to that, Jo, in terms of I think a lot of people, when they talk about wanting to change their culture, you know, you get the leadership team together, we'll be sitting around a table saying, like, this is what we need to change. And I always encourage people to start by actually asking all the employees. So I always engage with organisations at a really kind of hands-on level. And people say, oh yeah, we do these surveys, but I question how valid and how useful some of that data is, or what difference it makes. When you get people in a room, you're asking the right questions. It might be a metaphorical room at the moment, but you're asking the right questions, and you're finding out what they think is working well, what they enjoy about being at work, what makes them feel able to perform at their best, and what's getting in the way, what they would like to change, actually what their ideas are about how to change it. Then you have the really specific aspects, like Jo was referring to. You have to be really clear on what it is you want to change. As soon as you're really clear and you've got those ideas from the workforce, rather than a couple of people sitting separately, you can then start to use some of the quantitative data that Jo talked about. But you can also then start to create your own measures, such as, you know, rating scales are great. So someone's saying, you know, we don't gel as a team, and then you're unpicking that and saying, like, how are we going to create a culture where we can gel more? What are we going to do differently? And then you start to say, right, where are we now? And afterwards, it's a where are we now afterwards? And even just rating scales are really, really good at helping demonstrate how people are feeling differently. And then that was obviously feeding into, now look at the difference in terms of how productive people are, look at people's performance, and look at the data after. So I'd always start with the emotional side first, because when people are engaged, it then has the impact afterwards. And I saw Adam's question as well about, you know, people thinking that culture is secondary. Actually, if you just do an experiment, you know, if you want to just drive the performance and say, you know, you've got to be better, you've got to be quicker, you've got to be faster, you've got to be whatever, more productive, and you just push that, that's one thing. Look at the data, and then look at actually where you turn on its head and you start focusing on your workforce and getting the people bit right of your culture, and then look at what just happens to your performance and your productivity, because that will increase. That's what I'd say on that.
Thank you.
Can I go to the next question? I've got an answer on that one. I didn't say anything. Can I leave in there? It's a great question in chat. I'm going to go there. Thank you for very interesting insights. If you do one thing to improve culture, where would you start? I would say model the behavior you want to be seen. So if you, whatever level you're in the organization, start by demonstrating what you would like people to do. And at a very simple example, I used to run a creative business. Our kitchens were a shitty mess. So I used to wash up the dishes every day. And eventually people, actually quite speedily, people got the point, actually, it's not acceptable to leave the kitchens in a mess like that. You know, Magnus, who's the MD, was quite happy to wash up. Maybe it's all right for me. So model the behavior. It's the fastest way to create change.
Can I also just add to that? Because I think modeling is so important. And I also think the whole, if you're wanting to, oh God, I completely just lost my chain of thought then. What was I going to say? Sorry. Come on, I'll come back to you.
I'll go.
I really wanted to share with you, but it's completely gone. I was just thinking about washing up the kitchen.
I will just share. I would add to the role modeling piece in this question, and I'd get all the leaders in a room together and really get them focused on how culture can going to Adam's questions, how culture isn't secondary to performance or margin. Culture is actually the way to get better performance and better margin. And so I'd start by getting everybody in a room and getting them really inspired and bought into that concept. Because I still think that there's a real disconnect there. Whilst leaders are talking about culture a lot and understand they need to talk about culture a lot, I'm not sure that they are they're really understanding what it means that they have to do. And I think so it starts with getting into their hearts and minds and getting them persuaded, and then role modeling, you know, as Magnus talked about.
What I wanted, it has come back to me, what I wanted to say, which is actually building on what both Joe and Magnus have said, is this whole, one of the findings that came out during lockdown number 1, was that despite managers saying that they felt that they were checking in with their teams really well, it's like, yeah, we're checking in with our people, we know how they're feeling, the data did not support that. So all the data was showing that employees were not feeling cared for enough. And so, and I love when Matt said that he felt, you know, he's experienced lots of kindness, because actually that's contrary to quite a number of organisations where people are saying they just don't feel they have that connect. And I would say we're so busy, you know, as leaders, as managers, we become so busy, we fill our diaries with stuff we've got to do, and we don't carve enough time out to actually take care of our employees. And when we create more time to be kind and make those connections and have forge genuine relationships, I think that's when the kind of the magic happens. And that's the bit that tends to get pushed aside, and we just allocate our, you know, once a fortnight or once a month chat to check in, rather than actually being much more sincere, much more genuine, much more infrequent but regular.
We've covered some of Adam's question already, but Lisa, you mentioned an ROI figure when you were talking of 6 to 1. I know I've double checked with you where that came from. Would you just mind sharing that with the group? Because there might be other, if we're looking for more sort of tangible data and stats to back up.
Yeah, shall I just put it in the chat? The reference is there's loads of studies. I've got hundreds of studies I've referred to because I do lots and lots of research around it. But the two of the studies I was looking at, or two of the sources of information, were, one was about Deloitte's Mental Health and Employers Refreshing the Case for Investment, which was in January 2020, and then the other one was the Business in the Community Time to Take Ownership 2019. But if I just share that with everyone.
Yeah. We can also send it out on an email to everybody that's on the call as well. So if any other kind of suggestions you've got where we can access those kind of stats and data, would be really interesting to distribute.
Yeah, okay.
So I have another question, because we've got a lot of agency leaders on the call, and so we were talking about the impact it can have on people emotionally when they're in a company and you're embarking on change, maybe specifically cultural change. And this is specifically for the agency leaders. If you're trying to drive some change around company culture and you're meeting some resistance, are there kind of techniques or advice that you might have for them in order to sort of overcome it and work with them? Anybody like to take that?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. So I guess that fits a little bit with what I was talking about in terms of recognizing the emotional side of change. And I think it's always about getting as much information flowing two-way in an organization. So we tend to be really good at passing information down about what's going on and why, what's happening and when it's happening and so on. We tend to be less good at getting information coming back up. So information has to be two-way. And I think when we really understand what people's worries are and what their concerns are, and knowing and expecting resistance, you know, I think as part of change, we see resistance as people being a bit stubborn and a bit stroppy and not very amenable, but actually it's a normal part of what goes on psychologically for us. Our brain doesn't like change because it has to work quite hard at taking on a new perspective or a new way of doing things. So it's going to naturally resist. But if you can create case for what the positives are and help people understand the benefits of it, and really engage emotionally in terms of what's in it for them, and then find out what it is that they don't like about the idea of it. Because once you understand from them what's getting in the way, you can then start to address that directly. So there is a model, a cycle of change, which has kind of 6 different parts going around a cycle. And if you can identify where people are at by looking at their behaviors and hearing what they're saying, you can then there are little insights into how to move them on to the next stage of the cycle. And I guess the other thing is knowing that work is always going to be changing. Because I was chatting to some leaders the other day who were saying, oh, we always feel like we're just going through one change after another. It's like, well, yeah, but that's life. And, you know, change doesn't stop. You don't get to a kind of full stop and it's like, phew, we're here now. It's like there will always be change. So there'll always be resistance. And as long as we are hearing and showing empathy towards people and engaging on an emotional level, so that's about the relationships, then we can lead them through that. It's about being patient, understanding psychological safety around people will make mistakes if they're doing something new. It's okay for performance to dip, because if you're doing something new, you're not going to be as proficient, all those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I totally, oh, sorry.
So you go.
Yeah, I mean, I just build on a bit on what Lisa said. It's the end of the day, people don't like things being done to them. So it's kind of like, you know, sort of the more you can get a two-way conversation going, and the more you can explain, you know, why you're taking the actions you are. You know, there's sort of often senior management teams think, oh, we can't really go into all the detail because people won't understand, they're not interested. It's be as open as you can be for why you're taking the actions, why you're heading in the direction you are, and you'll find that people are much more willing to come on board rather than, you know, having to do something and they don't really understand the reasons why.
Jo,
yeah, I would totally agree with everything that's been said so far. I think it's absolutely about explaining the why we're doing this, and connecting it to the North Star, the reason we're all here, but also connecting it to the individual and the individual purpose, and making it meaningful for them. And then I think it's about how it's done, how these things are done, and making sure that it's human, and that as Lisa and Magnus are saying, as you know, we're talking to people and understanding where they're coming from, doing everything in the right way, in a human way, remembering there's a human being involved in this. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So anybody else on the call like to put anything forward? We've got a few minutes left. If not, so one, on that last subject, I remember being in a company and this kind of consultant just breezed in from nowhere, and it was this enigma, and they'd appear in the boardroom and then they go, and then 2 weeks later we were all presented a slide deck basically focusing on what the new culture would be, and we just kind of sat there being presented to and spoken to, thinking, where on earth has this come from? And there was a lot of resistance to that change, basically because no one felt like they were consulted or part of it. We were just being told what to do, and that had come from a consultant that had popped in. We have another question from Catherine. I think we've kind of been through that one. The one thing you do today to improve agency culture. Okay. How about, we've got a few more minutes left. Let's finish off on the kindness note, shall we? Because I love that. And so if we all maybe had a chance to think about one example that we'd like to share with the group of where kindness has had a real positive impact on agency culture, something that you've experienced, maybe over the last 6 months as well, when I think we've all been in need of a bit of kindness. Would anybody like to offer an example?
Go on, Magnus.
We've had your home cooked meals one, Magnus. Have you got another?
Yeah, I've got another one. I've got loads. There's another one which is actually came from the Alliance's furloughed community, and this was actually about kindness to yourself, which I thought was great. When I talk about kindness, I do say it starts with yourself, because if you can't be kind to yourself, you're not going to be kind to anyone else. And it was just a little thing about, people were talking about, and we all know this, working at home, Zoom days seem to have extended out way, kind of, we're sort of on monitors the whole time. And it was just somebody talking about that she started gardening, and like just a few plants on a windowsill and stuff like that. And she was just describing how she was looking for something that she hadn't done before. She had a bit of time. She was furloughed, and just, this was about her taking a few moments in each day to kind of tend to the plants and be kind to herself. It was, and again, it was a really simple little example. And in the room when we were talking about it, everyone went, "Oh, I get that. You just, you're taking some time out. Brilliant." Another little example. Being kind to yourself is really important.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I think there have been quite a few good examples of that over lockdown, since people have been working from home, in terms of people still having a video chat, but while they're having lunch, or some people actually, rather than doing it over lunch, will actually be doing their work at their desks but have the video on with the rest of their team also working at their desk. So people just chat or just comment on someone's just come to the door, or it's just started raining outside, just the normal stuff you'd be having in an office. And then also encouraging each other and having some rules around when you need to have time when you're chatting with each other, when it's not work related. So for example, the idea of lunch, actually to move away from your desk, and if you're going to chat to each other, put earphones in. I mean, it's lovely seeing everyone on Zoom all the time, but we never used to use Zoom all the time, and people used to pick up a phone. And the whole idea of actually being able to go outside and have a walk and speak to each other with your headphones in is about being kind to yourself as well. You're getting outside, you're getting away from your desk, you're moving, getting fresh air, and all that is obviously really good for your well-being. But again, that comes from having those kind of expectations that kindness isn't a luxury, it's actually a real necessity. When we're kind to ourselves and we start looking after ourselves and nurturing ourselves, it really brings our emotional arousal down. It puts us in a much better place to be able to then re-engage with work.
Yeah, and I've funnily enough got another lockdown example to give. This is somebody who is a leader of people, and someone in their team was particularly struggling, and so they decided that everyone was working remotely. So, but this person decided to go and meet in person in a coffee shop near to where their team member kind of lived, to have some one-on-one time actually in person. Obviously, the other person was up for it. They may not have been, but they were. And so, despite this, this people leader being really busy themselves and having loads of stress, etc., they took time out to travel to go and see kind of one-to-one and have some one-to-one FaceTime, as close as you can get these days, with their team member, because they were struggling. And I think that's just really selfless, actually, and a great, a great show of what great people leadership looks like. So, yeah.
I have one too. I'll add to that. I was working somewhere recently, and it was a really crazy time, and somebody suffered their family bereavement. It was their father. And I remember being in a meeting, and the CEO just took everything out of her diary and went to the funeral to support them because she knew of him. And it was just non-questionable, it was like automatic. It's like, that's, the other stuff's not as important. And we were all told, clear the diary. And I said, "What are you doing?" She told me, and I was like, wow, I'd only just joined the company. I was like, that's cool. I like that. Okay, well, we are 1 minute to 10 o'clock. And I know it's Wednesday morning. Everybody's probably got a busy day ahead. Look, we'll send some references to some of the documents and the insights out on an email to everybody. Please don't let this be the last event that you'll attend at the Festival of Happiness. We've got another one later on this afternoon, and we've got 2 more tomorrow at 9 o'clock and 5 p.m. Have a look at our website and you can book up if you haven't done already. Thanks very much for joining, everyone. Thanks for posting your questions, and look, a huge thank you to our panel. Thank you, Lisa, Joe and Magnus, for giving up your time. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody else did. It's really important. And it's kind of, I think it's kind of to some extent demystified culture for me. I do find it a difficult thing sometimes to get our head around, and you've really helped me do that. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay. Well, we got still a few more people on. How you doing, Terry, Graham? All good?
Yeah.
Yeah, all good. Well done.
That was
Yeah,
interesting.
great.
It went well.
Take over that.
Had a some really nice feedback. I know we've still got. So we're all good for later then, Graham?
Yeah. So I think
Was that okay?
I think it went really well, I thought.
Yeah, it was great.
And even the little human touch from Lisa forgetting what she was going to say, I thought was actually kind of brought it to life and made it human and all the rest of it. So yeah, I guess in 10 minutes they really struggle to get into some of the meat. Although I think Magnus focusing on one thing, because he does a 6-part cultural sandwich. To focus on kindness actually works, because you get that, don't you?
Yeah.
Kind of get all the benefits of kindness for the individual, the organisation, and I think it does set a really good tone.
Yeah.
And
I like the 10 minutes bit. I think he did area, but it didn't seem to go on, and they kept a fairly top line. I thought it worked quite well.
Yeah, we've got that coming tomorrow. By the way, are you going to do tomorrow morning, or do I need to prep?
Tomorrow morning, Thursday. Oh, I'll have to check and see if I've got anything on for the other lot. And they're fine with me changing days as well. So next week, I've told them I'll do Tuesday, Thursday, so I can do Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Okay.
That's what we agreed yesterday, yeah?
Yeah, except next Tuesday's a green jam.
Oh, fuck, yeah. That's at the end of the day. I'll be able to make that, I'm sure.
4 till 5.
That's at 4, right? Okay. Well, I'll definitely make that. Okay. I'll check.
I think that went well. I had a note back from Adam today asking if there's any feedback, so I should just say all good.
Adam.
The guy, Adam, who did the thing last night on resilience.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I thought it was really good. I thought it was really good.
I don't have an email. Can you ask him for the slides?
Yeah.
He said he'd be fine to distribute them.
He was very generous with lots of things. He actually offered to give everyone access to his website assets and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What will you be able to send out from today?
We can upload.
Giving us a few references to
I've just been recording.
talking to her in the